Welcome to another episode of the Growth Compass. Shout out to our sponsor senders. If you want to do cold email deliverability correctly, hit the link in the description. But without them, I wouldn't be able to speak to incredible people doing incredible things like Sonya Davidson. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
That's so good. I already told you, but I'm going to tell everybody else how excited I am to speak to you and about what you're building in your journey so far. There's just not enough time in an entire day to get through all of my questions. So I'm excited to learn more from you, but if you could just give a quick introduction of yourself and H2 Energy now, and then we can get started.
I was born a little bit all over. I was
Awesome.
born in Michigan, the United States. Went to
Nice.
elementary school in Kentucky, high school in Brussels, Belgium, Je
Wow.
suis parlé français. College both at Florida Institute of Technology in Florida and Northwood University in Michigan, Midland, Michigan. My dad worked for Dow Corning, and I got to travel the world because of that, which is
Wow.
nice.
Yeah.
I ended up with 5 degrees. The first degree was fun. I was sitting in Belgium and I got a catalog from a college in Florida, said, come and spend 3 weeks and you get 3 college credits. And I thought, oh, that would be fun. And this was the plan. We met on their campus. They took us to Cape Canaveral to watch some rockets go up, which was awesome.
Wow.
They took us to Disney World, which was amazing. Then 2 weeks we were in the Bahamas. 1 week we got our scuba diving certificate, and then we went diving in the Bahamas, counting fish and stuff like that. It was fun. I
Wow.
knew that if you're going to pick a school for something to get a degree, that's fun. I thought that would be a great thing to do.
Wow.
The campus was on the beach, and they had sailboats and stuff like that. I had 2 summer jobs, one offshore Louisiana, working with tugboats, which were supplying stuff, moving stuff all around the coast there. One offshore Alaska, where they were prospecting for oil off the Aleutian Islands. They'll never drill it, but we found a lot of oil up there.
Wow. Okay.
Went back to school and got 2 more degrees right away. I got my bachelor's in business administration and associates in banking and finance. Took a few more classes, got a degree in accounting, sat for and passed the CPA, Certified Public Accounting exam, and the Certified Internal Auditor exam. I've been studying hydrogen for years. It all started because of something that happened in my life. When I was young, I spilled water, and my mom, instead of getting mad at me, took the time to explain some of the principles of water to me. So whenever I was in elementary school, high school, or university, and they mentioned water, I paid attention. So when I had time, I made Aliyah to Israel in 2007, worked for a company for a few years. I decided to develop the idea. I realized energy storage was key to us using renewable energies 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you could come up with a good storage solution, now batteries go back maybe 400 years. Electrolysis 1864, but we came up with it at a different angle. We thought, well, think of a microwave. It uses electromagnetic waves. And our technology uses electromagnetic waves to separate the water molecule into hydrogen and oxygen. So we spent some years building prototypes and tested them till we reached a proof of principle prototype stage. And we also filed our patents. We had patents that were granted both in the United States and in Europe. And Europe said, thank you for your patents, but you need to file additional patents. So we filed in France, Germany, and Great Britain.
Wow.
And the spooky thing about Europe is that every year your patent cost goes up. They charge you more. In the US, it's kind of flat all the way through, which is easier. But in Europe, they figure it's worth more. So that's a little bit about. I'm a graduate of 2 accelerators, which were 6-month programs. One was located in Ashdod, Israel, called the Hive by Gavahim, and one at Azrieli College of Engineering in Jerusalem, called A2B.
So
Um,
Yeah, so thank you for all of that context because that is an incredible origin story, and I'm sure that's only like a drop in the ocean of your story. But I do see if you go on your LinkedIn page, you have this journey with H2 Energy now being roughly 15 years. Is that about accurate?
that's correct. That's correct. Now, one of the reasons it's so long is in Israel, you could apply for a grant. And then the way they set it up is you could only talk to one person on your application process. And the person from the program told me I had to be incorporated. So I went and incorporated. Well, it wasn't exactly true.
Okay.
I didn't need to incorporate way back then, but I incorporated and kept it going since then. I could have de-incorporated and brought it back.
Okay.
We
Okay.
became a we became a U.S. corporation in 2024 in Delaware too.
Wonderful. Hey, congratulations. So,
Thanks.
so I guess so if that's the first time that you had decided to pursue this in a commercial capacity, how would you describe let's start at a high level. If I saw on your website you guys are focusing on commercialization now, which I definitely want to get to, but over the last, well, let's say if it's 15 years on a high level, if you could break down what you have spent time on in each of those 15 years. Like at the beginning you said you were still doing research, maybe at some point, how many years you had spent creating a prototype, and then you spent a couple of years iterating on that prototype and then applying for patents. Like what does that journey look like at a high level the last 15 years to get to this point?
Part of it is learning. You don't know the right questions to ask, and that's why going through accelerators helps. Both of them were 6 months, and they both gave you access to people who knew how to not only how to ask, but how to explain your story, how to make presentations, how to network with people, how to put your company out there. Part of it, since this was a new technology, was research. We did actually find other technologies that are similar to it. There's a place called the Helmholtz Center for Environmental Research in Germany, and they said that you can disassociate water using electromagnetic waves, similar to our technology. The production of hydrogen is done at a steady rate. Gas formation is in proportion to the power you put in, and it uses RF generation matching networks, very similar to our technologies. So finding something like that lowers some investors' potential risk of it. Part of it is also we worked with interns over the time. We have two coming this summer, but we've had a total of 17 over time. No, normally engineers from the United States, Canada, and this year we have one coming from France and one coming from Arizona State University.
Wow. So yes, so those interns were dedicated to mostly research. Is that true?
Right, right. They were first. They had to understand the technology, which isn't as straightforward as you would think, but also how to learn how to look at the world a little bit different. If you're working on the edge of technology, that's what you end up doing. How can you figure out a way to do this? Last year, I listened to two very good lectures. The first one was by an accelerator in California. And they said for hardware technologies, which is ours, that one of the key things you need to do, besides getting LOIs, letters of intent, from potential customers, and the second thing is that when you're building your product, do not invent everything. Invent one key portion of it and buy everything else from the market. By doing that, you don't have all these regulatory issues to run into when you're trying to bring your product into market. Because there are RF generators and matching networks out in the market. Why would I build one of those when I can buy one off the shelf?
Wow.
There are
So
systems, etc.
yeah, so when so
So
when did you attend that lecture?
I think it was last September or so. It was pretty
Oh,
good.
okay, so pretty recent because I'm still trying to get an understanding of, so if you guys just incorporated as a US entity last year, and you guys have been in development process for the last 10 years or so, Has most of that been around getting those letters of intent and developing your product further? Is that accurate? And then getting the patents as well?
Correct. Part of it is there's a wonderful saying in Judaism that says, "Who is wise? Those willing to learn from everyone." So when we were building a product, I realized I didn't need a pool of water because, like in electrolysis, I'm not having two electrodes go in the water. I'm using radio waves. So I knew, therefore, we could use salt water. You never use salt water as because you need an electrolyte, and salt is an electrolyte in your separation chamber. But I realized I could change the arrangement of the water in the container. So I read a book called Einstein in Berlin, and the author said that he came up with some of his solutions by doing something called thought experiments. There's a nice German word for it, but I won't try to say that.
Okay.
So I said I could do that. So I took the water first and went to space. You can see water as a spherical ball on the space station. That wasn't the solution, but it was interesting. At least think outside the box.
You went to space?
No, I just, that was the idea.
Okay.
So I
All
went to
right. Okay.
space to see if there was anybody playing with water in space. Surely enough, there is.
Got
The
it.
second thing I did was I took the water in my mind and I squished it down. I increased the pressure on the water. As much as I know about water, I knew that first I ended up with one good thing and one bad thing. Good thing, higher pressure hydrogen. Bad thing, lower efficiency. Because I increased the ability of water to share energy or convection. So that didn't solve it. So the way it works in my mind is I just leave it in there and let it float around. Then one Friday night, walking home in the quiet of the town, I remember seeing a spider web as a child with droplets of water on it, and we knew that was the solution. So we went from a pool of water to droplets. The advantages of that is that one droplet cannot share energy with the next droplet. Therefore, when it gets hit with energy, it separates. So that was one of the steps we went through. Filing patents is a process you have to learn how to do. Patents are written by patent lawyers. So you have to see how they speak. So we did a lot of our own patent research before we hired patent lawyers. We went through two provisional patents, one patent convention treaty, one U.S. patent, one European patent, one France, Germany, and Great Britain. So we have a portfolio of 8 patents already. That's part of the process. And they normally say, well, yes or no, but you have to work with your patent lawyers to get it approved. And they've been granted. One of the things they learn also is that you have to share your idea. So the first time I shared my idea, I shared it with members of my synagogue or in my community. And based on that, I ended up with a board of advisors, and they provided me insight when I'm building this. For example, we needed a large RF resistor, not a little tiny one, but a big one, because we're putting a lot of wattage to it. So I talked to one of my mentors or advisors, and he said, we used to make these things. I'll go back to the company and I can see if we can get you some. He
Wow.
goes back to his company, and lo and behold, they stopped making them. But he stayed after work with his old boss, and they made me two and gave them to me.
Wow.
That's the way you move forward. We also have a philosophy that you build up when you're building a company. And one of mine is if you believe in yourself, you apply. If they say no, you still won because you believed in yourself. You're not looking for outside recognition that I did this good or not good. You believe in yourself, and there could be lots of reasons why they said no. One of the places we applied to was NASA iTech, which has approximately 60,000 hits on their website every 6 months to apply to NASA. Then it's reviewed by their 12 technical centers, and 10 people can present to NASA about their technology. So we applied, and we were one of the 10 selected to present to NASA, and they brought us on one of their television sets. We had 3 days with them because there's water on the moon and Mars. So there is a potential that our technology could end up on the moon or Mars. Now,
Like,
the advantage of that is that our technology or our product is light, and everything in space is based on weight because you have to get it up there, and it costs very much, costs a lot to get per kilogram or per pound to get up in space. So maybe someday our product will be on the moon and Mars, which would be cool.
hey, you did the thought experiment and you ended up in
Right.
space, and now you might actually end up there.
Yeah. I also, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, no, I just, it's fascinating to me. All of this, this is so amazing, and I have two main questions. The first one is, how do you, in the on your way to the point of commercialization, how do you know what and how many patents to apply for?
Well, a patent convention treaty covers the whole world. Okay. That was one of the steps we went through. But then you have to pay to apply for the whole world. And that gets expensive because you got to realize that some countries don't accept English. Like if you apply for China, you have to translate it to Chinese, Japan to Japanese. So there are some markets in the world we don't have patents. There's we couldn't afford that. So to us, it was an economic decision. Most people that I talk to in the United States, they think U.S. only. Since we're in Israel, we think more of the world. So that's why I have European patents and U.S. patents.
And patents can be a strategic tool or asset when it comes to commercialization, right?
Correct. One of the patent lawyers I talked to said you should think of patents like a chess game. You're trying to block the other player from using your or utilizing your technology because you're going to spend some money developing it, get it in the market, etc. You don't want them to come in and steal it per se. So if you can block them some way, then you have a good patent. But that's the way he explained it, and
Got
I
it.
understood that very clearly,
Uh, so
like a
so then,
chess move.
yeah, right. So was it? Do you play chess yourself?
Yes, I do.
I bet you're incredible at it. We should play sometime. In that process, though, from that perspective, where you say, okay, so I guess I want to connect it with the thing you said earlier, which is from the which is don't invent everything, invent one thing, and then use the rest of the things from the market. So, how early on did you decide on the one thing that you would invent and then therefore get patented?
As you learn the market or learn the product and the place it's going to fit in, you learn your competition. Now, in electrolysis, they add water to their machine. That's not part of their patents really, but we would do the same thing. We have to add water to our separation chamber. They they use water plus a catalyst. Now there are different. There was in I think in the Helmholtz or the Copper Institute, they did actually test quite a few catalysts to add to your process. So we're going to use one of those if we weren't going to do it on salt water. So that's where you learn. But in electrolysis, they also everybody wants pure hydrogen when it comes out. So there's actually a filter. It's called an MEA filter that you put over your process. So when the hydrogen comes out, since it's the smallest molecule, it floats through the filter. But the oxygen or water vapor gets blocked by the filter. So you can get 99.9% clear hydrogen. Now they in their process, if you're going to store it, you need to compress it. So that's the next stage in theirs. And we don't, we're similar in those, so we can use existing technologies already in the market for that. We would be focusing just on our disassociation chamber.
Okay, and at what point was that? Like 10 years ago, did you have the visibility that that was the part that you were going to be patenting, or at what point did that become clear that that
Uh,
was the part?
and 10 years ago.
Awesome. And that hasn't really deviated much from 10 years ago.
No, no.
Wow, incredible. So if commercial, so how recently did commercialization specifically become a priority for you guys?
We believe there's a market. Now the market keeps changing. But that's the
Sure.
way the markets are.
Right.
The first largest use of hydrogen in the market was something you couldn't have predicted 10 years ago, but it was actually forklift operators in Europe in big giant separation or distribution centers are using hydrogen instead of the natural gas. The advantage is you're not releasing any CO into the building. You're, you're releasing water. And it's just as fast to refill a hydrogen cylinder as it would be a natural gas cylinder. So that was the two advantages. And therefore in Europe, a lot of the first markets was that. Now the other same thing that happened around the same time is hydrogen been used commercially for a lot of times for chemical processes. So that would be a market too. Now, we were looking recently last year very much at what, because you have to determine which market you want to go into first. Watching something on European, they call it a European spot market, which means that electricity costs change based on the hour of the day. Now, some countries have a lot of renewable energy, like Denmark. I think it has 98% of their daily electrical needs are met by wind power. And so solar is prevalent in the southern part of Europe because the sun is there. Northern part is so-so. Wind's more prevalent in the northern part. But there was a time in the winter when there was a high demand on the grid and there was no wind and no sun. So that sent that spot market price, which is normally like €6 per kilowatt, to €66, 200 per watt. Because there was, where are you going to get the power if you don't have it from renewables? That's why when you need batteries can give you 4 hours. Well, you need more than 4 hours sometimes. And that was the real problem. Now the next a week later they had enough power, but during that short period of time they didn't.
Wow.
The most efficient though method in the market for energy storage is actually pumped hydro. You take water, you pump it on top of a mountain, store it up there, drill a hole through the mountain, get all these environmental certificates, and run the water down through generators and you got power. Now it costs around $500 million or $500 million to build these plants and maintain them, but they're very efficient. But a lot of places in Europe don't have those mountains. Like Netherlands is flat. Belgium's pretty much flat. So there's places you can't use that, where that would be the best solution. Now, Switzerland has been making a lot of money by selling their electricity because they have a lot of hydrogen plants to Europe to make it. But it's not like one region of the United States selling it to another, but it's like that. But it's understanding the market that way is important to understand it too. What's the needs? What's the desires?
Yeah, so then is it correct to say that just as of last year, as far as the priorities go in H2 Energy now, the priority to commercialize and the priority to begin generating revenue happened last year, or did it happen before that?
It happened last year, but we were fundraising. That's what we were trying to do, raise the funds to do that. I know I presented once or twice in Colorado with the U.S. Department of Energy conference there, where they have hydrogen companies present. Now, most of the U.S. companies that were presenting, the majority of them had $2 to $5 million in grants already. So they were developed, their product was more developed than ours because we don't have those grants here as
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. So then is it something, would you describe the place that you're in as, are you going to market now? Or do you have a plan to do that at some point in the future?
We have a plan to. We have a
Awesome.
plan to. We have a plan that's what we've been using our interns for the last few years was to build all these subsystems that we need to commercialize our product. Where can
Understood.
you get this? Is it available in the market? Where can you buy it?
Yeah.
What's the cost of it,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah. So when it comes to going to market or commercializing a technology as deep, innovative, like really awesome as your guys's. How do you decide between, like, what strategies are you guys looking to implement? Is it partnerships? Is it looking to work with governments? Is it working with policy? Do you even need to do that? Is it standard, like private company, like marketing sales? Like, how are you guys thinking about it?
It's a lot more complicated than you think it would be.
I think it's
It's
pretty
not like selling.
complicated.
It's not like selling a toaster or something like that. I remember sitting in on a conference call with New England, very pro green everything. Okay, now the companies that were presenting said even though they were very pro, they had to go through all these regulatory issues to get their product in the market, and often their price of whatever they thought their product was going to be was triple. The original cost was one third, and it took them two-thirds with regulatory approvals, labs, and all the other stuff they needed to get to market and in there, and what the people, etc. So it's not as straightforward sometimes. If you can use the hydrogen that we generate right away, I think that's the best thing. Therefore, storage, because storage takes energy. So if you can use it right away, you're better off. And I think that's probably going to be the first market. Then
Awesome.
into energy storage, etc. I took some classes and I continue to take classes. I took from MITx, which is free online, how to design the space shuttle, which was really cool because they went through, I listened to it from several different levels. How do you explain something very complicated simply? And how did they solve a problem on Earth for something going into space? And one of the things that I remember was they were having a trouble in space. Fuel ends up in a big ball inside their containers. How do you get the fuel started? Once you get it started, it works. And one of the guys in the class says, well, I used to have an old tractor. And when we were almost out of gas, we had a special thing. We would flip it up the other way and it would stick into the gasoline and start the gasoline to run our tractor so we can get back to the place and get some more gasoline or diesel, whatever it was running on. And that's exactly what they built in the space shuttle, which I thought was interesting.
Wow.
They sometimes when you're developing a product, you never know what some things you don't even know. They had the booster plants which held this styrofoam on the outside of them when they filled them up, which got really cold, and they ran into a problem. The problem was birds thought this would be a nice thing to make a nest from.
No way.
So they went and started picking these tanks, which wasn't really the best thing to do. So NASA came up with putting some fake owls and owl sounds near the
Wow.
Cape when they had it on the pad. So it was that, but it's that kind of solution that can save you a lot of money, and it's a great insight into when you're developing a product. I took a class called Kathy Loves Physics and History online, which was 78 classes. She's a YouTube star, and she showed how this electricity influenced this electrician, etc., going up as you're developing electricity. I took the periodic table of elements, which was very good from Hillsdale College. Greek logic is fundamental to understanding math, which I thought was interesting because it wasn't the one you would think. It was if you couldn't prove it, doesn't it might mean it's proved backwards. And I just finished. I took microgrids from the University of Alaska because Alaska has the largest microgrids in all of the United States because they have all these remote villages and there's no national grid up there. So how does somewhere way out in the middle of somewhere have power? How do they keep power? And you need power, especially in the winter for heat. You need power to keep things cold sometimes. You need power for, phones, electronics that we use now. So they had to figure out how to build these microgrids. It all depended on which part and where they were, because they found that diesel fuel and their diesel fuel generators got very expensive at times because they're not only the cost of the diesel fuel, it was the transportation to some remote part in Alaska. So to me, it was understanding, and there wasn't one size fits all. It was a mixture of all kinds of different things to make this grid self-sufficient and off. So To me, you gain knowledge by listening to something like that.
So have all of these different educational experiences for you informed the ideas of how you will eventually bring your technology to market?
Sure, sure, definitely, definitely. It shows you a roadmap on how to get there.
Got it. Understood. Well, Sonia, I have coming up on time tragically, and I have two of my favorite questions for you. The first one
Okay.
is, at the moment, as of right now, what would you say is your biggest challenge, and how does it serve as an opportunity?
I think as a startup, you're always connecting to people, and that's the road forward. Sometimes they're good connections, sometimes they're not good connections. That's just the way life is. But connecting to people who know things and can help you get there are very valuable, especially in a startup. I listened to a video earlier this morning from some accelerator in UK, and they said where they were asking the startups what it was like to be a startup, and one of the guys says like treading water, and the person in the boat is giving you bricks, which I thought was pretty mean. I would have gone, oops, I lost their bricks. Sorry about that.
Yeah, yeah.
But that was I thought it was an interesting thing to show that.
That's funny. So then your biggest challenge that you're navigating at the moment, would you say, is connecting to people that give you information about what you need,
Sure,
like clarity on your next step?
sure. Sure. You because there's always more than one way to get to the end thing. We want a commercial prototype. One of the lectures I listened to, the second really good lecture I listened to last year, was from a person who does a lot of patents in Australia. And he said the best thing to do for a startup is to connect to a commercial partner who understands the market and is just looking for a new product to bring into the market. They might not be able to fund you that much, but they can have the connections and they can help you get to the market a lot quicker. And they have the sales channels to deliver to market.
Interesting.
So it might be licensing, it might be a partnership, whatever. And I think that's another way you can overcome some barriers of bringing a new product into market. Because that other company would smooth over and they got the customers willing to try something new. And they know which customers would be willing to try something new. If I went there, I'd be going like, what's the regulatory requirements in XYZ in America? That would drive me crazy because it's not only the federal, it's the state, this county, the city, etc., all the way down. You'd have to qualify. But if you've got a partner, it's a lot easier that way.
Got it. And then following up, not unrelated to the last question, what inspires you?
I think inspiration comes from looking at the world. I see the good in the world, and there's lots of good. I see two elderly people walking in my neighborhood. One of them is handicapped or can't walk as well, but the other one's there. And I'm going like, that's a pretty amazing thing to see. I see all the children in Israel. I think that motivates me. I think we're a very young country because of that. I think that's part of it. Also, I think it's just you have a choice always how you're going to look at the world. If you focus on negative things, you're going to see negative things. If you focus on positive things, you'll see positive things. If you read the stories of people who've been here before, you look at Lewis and Clark, for instance, that went across America. They had some rough days, but they said that it wasn't like they were online or they could call for help somewhere along their journey. They had to find a solution with what they had sometimes.
Awesome. Well, and it seems like you're doing that every day.
You have to. Don't look for other people to say you're a great person. You're not going to hear it that often. But if you believe it inside and you reinforce that belief inside yourself that you're a good person and you help people or you make a difference in the world you live in, it's amazing. You don't need that. It's not necessary.
Awesome. Well, Sonia, thank you so much. You're inspiring me right now. You're doing something very hard, so I appreciate what you're doing, and I'm extremely excited to keep in touch with your guys' development. If you've piqued somebody interest and they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch?
Sonya, Sonya, at h2energynow.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time
Thank you.
today. I can't
Of
wait for the
course.
next one.
Okay, great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye bye.